Welcome to All Things Conflict. I'm your host, Maria Arpa, and in today's episode, I'm going to introduce you to a very dear friend of mine, a philosopher, who's going to talk about systemic win. When I first met Paul, he and I absolutely did not like each other. And I soon realised that he was going to be hanging around in my network and we needed to get to know each other. So we built this very, very affirming, lifelong friendship since. So Paul, I'm so glad you're here and that you've agreed to do this. We've known each other a long time and it hasn't always been plain sailing. We've had some very good quality fights, I'd say.
Yeah, you're taking a big risk.
Always with you, Paul, always. But we've had some really good quality fights. But what I really enjoy about when we argue is how we always manage to find a way to have the real conversation. You know, it might take a day, a week, a month or whatever, but we end up having the real conversation. And when we end up having the real conversation, you know, I learn from you. I understand. Something always grows in me as a result of talking to you. So I'm really excited for, you know, the viewers or the listeners to this podcast to understand something about a philosophy that you've created that you call systemic win. So what I'd love to do is just give you a moment to tell us about it.
Okay. I think the most basic thing for me is if there's a conflict, it's only over when you've got somewhere better than you were before the conflict began. And most people don't, you know, they get to, as long as it's not disastrous, they stop there. And that's crazy because if you haven't finished it in a place where you really want to continue relating to the other person, when you bump into them again, you're already in the wrong place. And years ago, I came across a thing called win-win. And something about it just didn't feel right to me. You know, it would say sort of positive and things. And I thought the trouble is, it's all very well me and you winning, but what about everyone else? So people say, well, we've got to have win-win-win. And it's like, okay, but we're part of something. It's not just about people. It's about our environment. It's about our society. So I ended up calling it systemic win because it's an ugly word, but or phrase, but it actually describes the system of self, the system of other, of you, the system, the society, the system of our environments, they all need to win. And the opposite is systemic lose, where what I do makes you unhappy and irritated. You do something that makes me unhappy. We have a fight, and then we bring in other people to fight on our behalves, and you end up with a war. And it's so easy to go in the wrong direction and create systemic lose. And it's like, we have so much creativity and so much ability to do positive things with each other. Why aren't we all aiming for systemic win?
What a great concept. And, you know, it's guided me in a lot of what I've done and my work with the dialogue roadmap, because behind any kind of process or system, you know, we're very good at coming up with systems and processes. I mean, whether they work or not, so I could write a thesis on that. But we're very good at doing that, but not so good these days at saying, well, what's the philosophy that we're drawing on? And so what I found with the dialogue roadmap and other processes like Marshall Rosenberg's work, nonviolent communication, is there's a philosophy behind that. So for me, systemic win has been a way of guiding me into what I'm doing. Does that make sense? Maybe you could expand on that for me, Paul.
Yeah, I mean, for me, philosophy is about how do I become wise? How do I live well? And it's like we can't not have a philosophy. But the trouble is then everyone fights over what's the right philosophy. You know, so Doesn't matter. So what I wanted was something. It doesn't matter whether you're religious, whether you are non-religious, whether you are atheist, whether you're agnostic. It's like because people have been trying to do good and help each other make the world better forever, and we're still not doing a very good job of it. So it's like, what's something we can all agree about that we all want, and what's the opposite? What's something we all dislike? And I would say, well, they're actually systemic win and systemic lose. So, well, it's just a simple philosophy. How do we help each other live well?
So, I love that. And what's happening for me as you're speaking is I'm thinking of indigenous people that I've sat with, true indigenous culture about we're just moving parts in an ecosystem. We don't have command of this or that. We want control. We want to own stuff. But actually, at the end of the day, there's an ecosystem, the planet, and I'm just a moving part in it. And there's something in what you're saying about each of us playing our part to make things better. Am I understanding that? Am I grasping it?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, as far as I can see, we've only really got two choices. Well, actually, we've got three. Am I trying to make it better? Am I trying to make it worse? Or do I not care? It just happens what happens. No, we have a lot of problems with our neighbours. And whether that's on a small scale or a country scale or whichever level.
Well, that's interesting, when I hear you say, Indigenous people might not do so well with their neighbours, and then we could, which we're not going to do, we could get into a whole conversation about colonisation. But if I go back to the essence of what you said, one of our choices is to make things better.
Yeah.
But how do we measure that? Because I think I'm making things better and you think you're making things better, but the ways in which we're trying to do that are actually going to bring us into even more conflict. How does systemic win inform what's making things better?
Well, I have a great friend who has a thing called the dialogue roadmap. Because the thing about it is, how do we have a conversation about it? Because I've got, as you said, I've got my sense of better, you've got your sense of better. How do we bring those how do we get the best of both those two betters?
So, Paul, in systemic win and, we talk about, am I making things better? Or the choices we have in life. Am I making things better? Am I making things worse? Or do I, just not care? Or whatever will be, will be. So for me, the problems arise is when I think that I know what will make things better and you think you know what will make things better, but the two strategies do not align because, in my opinion, that's not going to work. And in your opinion, what I'm going to do is going to leave somebody worse off. How do we measure that? How do we align in that place?
I think there are two levels to an answer to that. So one is we need to look at our own better and see, okay, it might be better for me, but is that better for you? Because if I just want to impose my better on you, that's not going to work, and vice versa. I think we have to keep coming back to, in the moment, am I bringing out the better out of you or the worse out of you? And that's... that's basic communication stuff. You can pay attention, you can notice, there's all sorts of feedback coming out of it. And it's amazing how few people notice the signs that I'm not bringing out the better in you. And then when you are irritated and upset and you're going to do something that niggles me a bit, then we're on that downhill thing where you're bringing out worse in me, I'm bringing out worse in you, and down we go. And it's like, and that's the point, we just have to notice we've got a choice. That's where we have to sometimes say, okay, hang on, let's stop a second, because my better isn't absolute. I'm not the universe. Your better isn't better. So it's like, how do we bring our betters together in a way that works, not in a way that doesn't work?
It's so beautiful. And that is even what you just said there about, I do have the power to notice if I'm bringing out the best in you or the worst in you. I mean, look, we've done it to each other, and we've definitely been through some pretty grim kind of struggles where we've completely disagreed on things. And you know I've had a tantrum occasionally. But I guess underneath that, there's a kind of a love in our friendship that means, you know, even if I've got on your nerves or you've got on my nerves, to the point where we can't talk to each other for a little bit, I think I can trust the love that, you know, what's needed and the period of calming down will bring us back to a place where we can bring the best out in each other. I mean, is that something that you recognise, or am I just in la la land? Or?
No, absolutely. I mean, I suppose if I'm trying to systematise it, I'd say we have three ways of responding. One is to ignore. So you could say when we're getting upset with each other, it's probably better to ignore each other for a bit. And, I mean, the other thing we can say, okay, how do we collaborate? And the other one is say, how do we fight, or how do we compete in some way? And we've always got a choice. Which of those three choices is going to work better in this moment?
Yeah, because the thing that came to me, as you were saying, how do we have this fight? Often what I've noticed, and, you know, I'm relating this to us, but I'm, you know, offering it up for the wider sort of, you know, the wider way in which we communicate with each other, is there's a power imbalance. So, you know, you and I are really good friends, and on one level, that means that we're completely equal. But when we work with each other, when we try to do work to each other, it's either your project or my project. And then power imbalances come in. You know, who holds the power? Who has the final say? Did we contract that properly? Did we agree that in advance? Did we assume things? So how would systemic win, the philosophy of systemic win, guide us through that kind of a mess?
You see, I suppose that makes me think about what I would term sort of leading and following. So you could say the person with the power, let's say they're leading. But when you're leading, sometimes you need, you know, it's hard work. You're pulling the other people along. And if you've got skillful people, you want them to take the lead, or that they have a task to do. So it's knowing when to lead and when to follow, when to exert one's power and when to hold it back. So this is where, I mean, one of the parts of systemic win is you could say, there's me, there's you, but there's the system, there's our friendship, there's our relationship. There's the greater things that we're both in service to. And it's like, which part of that needs to be dominant? You know, if it's my ego that's being dominant, well, things are going to go wrong. If it's your ego that's being dominant. So sometimes we're both serving something higher, and we need to look, you know, if I trust you, I will, you know, and you trust me, I will challenge you over something, even though you're the leader. And sometimes you'll say, look, I know what got to happen. And if I then start getting into a fight with you, I'm just being stupid. But then another time, you know, you're the one who's been stupid and I need to stand my ground.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I have had my moments of being stupid, Paul.
Really? God, this is the first, Maria.
This is the first. Oh my goodness. Yeah, look, this is really amazing. So I would love to just move the focus slightly, if that's okay with you, because, you know, I heard you say, you know, there's you, there's me, there's us, and then there's what we're in service of. And I don't want that to slip by, because you know, what are we in service of? So how do you put that philosophy into a workplace? And just before you go into that, give you a bit of time to sort of think about that. The reason I'm talking about this is because companies will often spend a fortune working out their values and their logo and their mission, and all of those things. But they can't actually tell you what was the philosophy they were drawing on. And I described you, and I do describe you as a philosopher. And it seems as if we've lost respect for, or we've sidelined, or we've ignored the idea that people can come up with philosophies, and that's actually the starting point. And because we're doing that automatically, whether we like it or not, we just probably haven't examined which philosophy we're coming from. So I'm thinking, how do you take this and plop it into a workplace if people said, yeah, let's get behind systemic win, let's redesign our workplace, and let's look at what we're actually in service of. So what would you do?
Well, I suppose I'd say, are you in service of the better that you still don't know what that is? Or have you got already fixed and limited better that you're obsessed with? So I suppose most workplaces, the person who founded the organization or the group that formed the organization, are they doing it just to make money? Well, even if you're doing it just to make money, how are you going to make sure that the people there want to be there, want to work hard, want to give their gifts, to you or to the organization or to the project? And that's why I'd say, in the end, what I want is, I want something that works well for me. I want it to work well for you, and I want it to work well for the container that we're part of. So, if the organization is only about people working hard and ignores their contributions to their family and looking after their family or their friends and their community, well, it's not sustainable. It's not going to work.
Yeah, so Paul, when you say, if it's only about the money and, having something that cares for all its parts, I suppose the brutal question is, why should anybody bother? I mean, if I'm making money and I can exploit people and I can, winner takes all, why should I bother?
Well, death's going to take you in the end. And well, the thing about it is, are we most successful when we're just using our power? Okay, I get to give a little example from a friend of mine. When he was in the army, and he was quite small, but he was very tough. And there was a guy who was bigger than him and bullied him. And so what he did was, in the night, he got out with his big army belt and beat this guy around his head. And he said, you can beat me up as many times as you want in a day, but every night you're going to know you're going to get beaten up by me. And it ended. Because just using power doesn't work.
So translate that into a workplace for me.
I think I need to give me a workplace scenario, and I'll tell you that.
So I'm really interested in, that story of, being really vulnerable when you're asleep. I mean, it's such a great example. I mean, it's sort of sad as well, because it suggests that the only reason that I should care about you is so that you don't get me back. But what I'm really wanting is to bring that into a workplace. Let's imagine a workplace where, power is being exerted, and that seems to be the system and the philosophy. What would you do differently?
Well, I think the first thing is to see, are they actually doing what I want? If I'm in a senior position, let's say, and I'm telling people to do this, that, and the other, are they actually doing what I want? Are they going an extra mile? Are they just about doing enough? What's going on? Most people, they put up with stuff that's really below what they actually want, but it's just, okay, it's good enough. I'll have to put up with it because it's going to take me too much effort to get people to do what I actually want. So it's like paying attention to when people are not performing as you want. And then it's, okay, what am I doing that's not bringing out the better in them?
So we come full circle, isn't it? What I'm doing that's inducing, dissent or belligerence or some kind of resentment. That's the word I'm looking for. And, although we often don't have the language or we don't dare to speak these things, we can show it. I can show it to you, and you can show it to me, and we're back to what am I doing that's making things worse or making things better?
Yeah. And it's, do we pay attention to what we see? Do we pay attention to what we're feeling inside of ourselves? Do we pay attention to what the reactions around us are? I mean, the problem is we have very limited awareness. And in some ways, if you really want things to work, you actually have to spread your awareness further, because you've got to pay attention to yourself. You've got to pay attention to the other person. You've got to pay attention to the context. And we all have enough difficulty just pay attention to one thing. And which is actually where we need to distribute our awareness amongst the group of us. I mean, it's like the concept maybe we'll talk about some other time, which I call the systemic self. You need to be systemically self-interested. You know, if I'm just going for what I want right now, well, what about my future self? If I've just pissed you off and I've got what I want, well, is that going to work well in my next engagement with you? How's that example I gave from the army, my friend, the man who was doing the bullying did not want that happened to his future self, which is why he stopped bullying.
Thank you, Paul. I mean, there's so much here, and we could talk for hours about this, but at the end of the day, this is a podcast. I want to give people a taste of something. There's much more we can dig into, and we will talk more about this. And, I'm sure that we're going to have many and varied conversations. So I want to thank you for just introducing us to this philosophy of systemic win. And if people wanted to know more or get in touch with you, how would they go about that?
Send me an email or ring me up.
Oh, you're so accessible, Paul. I love you so much as a friend and a colleague and a collaborator. Thank you for doing this. Is there any kind of last thing that you would want to just add, or some little gem that someone could take away? Maybe that thing about, when you find yourself in the struggle, what you can choose in that moment. I love that.
Well, I think it is a choice. Okay, which do I need? Do I need the space where I ignore? Do I want the energy of getting into the fight? Or am I saying, actually, let's collaborate, because life only works through collaboration. Our body only works because all these different parts of us work together. So the competition is great if it's properly managed, and the end result is us all winning. Not at the end of the competition is one person wins and everyone else loses.
Thank you. This has been a wonderful collaboration. I hope it's been great for you, and we'll do more in the future. Thank you, Paul.